The dust from the stagecoach had barely settled when Marion Caldwell heard the words that would change everything, spoken loud enough by Mrs. Hendricks, that half of Silver Creek. Wyoming could hear them in that sweltering August afternoon of 1882. "Nobody will marry a woman who cannot read," the banker's wife declared, her parasol casting shadows across Marion's flushed face. "A man needs a wife who can keep accounts, read recipes, teach his children. What use is a pretty face when the mind behind it is empty?" The words stung worse than any branding iron, and Marion felt 22 years of shame burning through her chest as she clutched her shopping basket tighter, wishing the wooden planks of the general store porch would swallow her whole. She had grown up on the outskirts of town with her father, a ranch hand who had died 2 years prior in a stampede, leaving her with nothing but a small cabin and the ability to cook, clean, and mend clothes. Her mother had passed when Marion was just a baby, and her father, though loving, had never learned to read himself. The letters on signs and newspapers might as well have been ancient hieroglyphics, meaningless shapes that taunted her every time she walked down Main Street. She had become skilled at hiding her illiteracy, nodding when people discussed the newspaper, pretending to scan menus at the hotel restaurant, memorizing the layout of stores so she would not have to ask where items were located. But Mrs. Hendricks had discovered her secret last week when Marion had asked the woman to read a letter that had arrived for her, supposedly from a distant aunt. The banker's wife had promised discretion, but that promise had lasted all of 6 days before becoming the juiciest gossip in Silver Creek. Now, as Marion hurried down the street, she could feel eyes on her from every direction, could hear the whispers that followed in her wake like tumbleweeds in a windstorm. She made it back to her cabin just as tears began streaming down her face. The small wooden structure sat at the edge of town, close enough to be considered part of Silver Creek, but far enough that she had some privacy. She had been taking in laundry and mending to make ends meet, but even that work was drying up now. Who wanted an illiterate woman handling their fine clothes? What if she could not read the care instructions, could not understand notes about stains or special treatment? Marion was stirring a pot of thin stew that evening when she heard hoofbeats approaching. She wiped her eyes and peered through the window, spotting a tall figure on horseback. The man dismounted with easy grace, and even in the fading light she recognized him as Colton Hayes, one of the cowboys from the massive Bridger ranch that sprawled across the valley. She had seen him in town before, always polite, always respectful, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He was perhaps 26 or 27, lean and strong from years of hard work. "Miss Caldwell," he called out, removing his hat as he approached her door. Marion opened it cautiously, her face still blotchy from crying. "Mr. Hayes, what brings you out here?" Colton shifted his weight, looking almost nervous, which seemed strange for a man who broke horses for a living. "I was in town today. I heard what Mrs. Hendricks said to you." He met her eyes directly, and she was struck by the kindness there, the complete absence of judgment. "That was a cruel thing she did, making your private business public like that. It's the truth, though, is it not?" Marion said bitterly. "I cannot read. I cannot write beyond my own name, and even that looks like chicken scratch. Truth or not, it was nobody's business but your own." Colton turned his hat in his hands. "Miss Caldwell, I have a proposition for you. I could teach you to read and write. Every evening after my work at the ranch is done, I could come here and give you lessons." Marion stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Why would you do that? You do not even know me." "I know enough." Colton's voice was steady and sure. "I know you are kind because I have seen you leave food for the stray dogs in town. I know you are hardworking because I see your laundry lines full every morning when I ride past. And I know what it is like to feel less than other people because of something that was not your fault." He paused, then added quietly, "My mother could not read either. She died ashamed of it, and I always wished I had been old enough to teach her before she passed. I was only 12 then, just learned myself from the ranch owner's daughter." Maybe I could not help her, but I can help you if you will let me." The sincerity in his voice made Marian's throat tighten. She wanted to say yes, wanted it so desperately she could taste it like sweet water after a long drought. But doubt crept in, bringing with it all her years of shame and hiding. "People will talk if you come here every evening. People are already talking. Let them say what they want." Colton smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer, more approachable. "Besides, we will leave your door open, everything proper and above board. I will bring books and slates, and we will work at your kitchen table where anyone passing by can see there is nothing untoward happening. I will be here to teach, nothing more." Marian found herself nodding before she had fully decided. "All right, yes, I want to learn." "Good." Colton placed his hat back on his head. "I will be here tomorrow evening around 7 o'clock when the sun starts setting. That will give me time to finish at the ranch and ride over." True to his word, Colton arrived the next evening carrying a leather satchel filled with books, a slate board, and chalk. Marian had cleaned her cabin until it shone, had changed into her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes, and had braided her honey-colored hair neatly. She felt absurdly nervous, like she was about to sit for some important examination rather than simply learn her letters. They sat across from each other at her small kitchen table, the door propped wide open as promised. The evening air was still warm, carrying the scent of sagebrush and prairie grass. Colton opened a primer that looked like it was meant for children, but he presented it without any condescension. "We will start with the alphabet," he said. 26 letters that make up every word you will ever need to read." He wrote them out on the slate in careful, neat strokes. A, B, C, D. His hands were calloused and strong, the hands of a man who worked with rope and leather and iron, yet he held the chalk with surprising gentleness. Marian watched, mesmerized, as the letters appeared like magic. "Now you try," he said, sliding the slate toward her. Her first attempts were shaky and uneven, the letters sprawling across the slate like drunken spiders. She felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but when she looked up, Colton was smiling encouragingly. "That is a fine start. Here, hold the chalk like this." He adjusted her grip, his fingers warm and slightly rough against hers. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, and she quickly focused back on the slate. "Now try again, nice and slow." They worked for 2 hours that first night, and by the end of it, Marian could write all 26 letters with increasing confidence. Her hand ached from the unfamiliar work, but it was a good ache, the kind that came from accomplishment rather than drudgery. "You are a quick learner," Colton said as he packed up his materials. "Tomorrow we will start on sounds, how the letters work together to make words." "Colton," she said, using his first name without thinking, then blushing at her boldness. "Thank you, truly. I do not know how I will ever repay you for this kindness." He paused in the doorway, backlit by the last rays of sunset that painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. "No repayment needed, Marian. Just keep showing up and trying your best. That is all I ask." The lessons became a fixture of Marian's life, as regular as sunrise. Every evening at 7 o'clock, Colton would arrive on his bay gelding, always bringing something new to teach her. They progressed from letters to simple words, from words to short sentences. He was patient beyond measure, never showing frustration when she struggled with particularly difficult combinations, always ready with another explanation or a different approach. "The English language is not always logical," he admitted one evening in mid-September when she was wrestling with words that broke every rule he had taught her. "Words like enough and through do not follow the patterns. Sometimes you just have to memorize them." "It feels like trying to rope a wild Mustang," Marian said with a laugh. "Just when I think I have got the hang of it, something new breaks free and runs in a different direction." "That is actually a perfect comparison." Colton grinned at her. "And you will gentle the language just like a good cowboy gentles a horse, with patience and persistence." As the weeks passed, Marian realized she was looking forward to the lessons for more than just the learning. She found herself watching the clock as 7 o'clock approached, found herself putting extra care into her appearance, choosing dresses that she knew were flattering, adding a ribbon to her hair. She told herself it was just about taking pride in her progress, about presenting herself well as any student should for their teacher. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Colton had a way of making her feel seen in a way she never had before. When he looked at her, it was not with pity for her illiteracy or desire for what her appearance might offer. He looked at her like she was a whole person, worthy of time and attention and respect. He asked her opinions about things, shared stories about his work at the ranch, brought her wildflowers sometimes that he had spotted on his ride over, presenting them almost shyly as if uncertain of his welcome. One evening in early October, as the air turned crisp with the promise of coming winter, Colton arrived looking troubled. He set up their materials mechanically, his usual easy manner replaced with tension that lined his shoulders. "What is wrong?" Marian asked after they had worked through her reading exercises. She had graduated to simple books now, children's tales that she sounded out slowly but surely. "The ranch is moving cattle to winter pasture," Colton said. "It is a 3-week drive down to the lower valleys. I will be leaving the day after tomorrow." The news hit Marian like a physical blow. 3 weeks without lessons, without seeing him, without the evening hours that had become the best part of her day. She tried to keep her voice steady. "That is part of ranch work. I understand. I do not want you to lose your progress." Colton reached into his satchel and pulled out 3 books. "I brought these for you to practice with while I am gone. Read a little every day, even if it is just a few pages. And write too. Maybe keep a journal, just a few sentences about your day. It will help keep the learning fresh." Marian took the books with trembling hands. "I will miss the lessons." "Just the lessons?" Colton asked softly, his dark eyes intense on hers. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Marian felt her heart pounding so hard she was certain he must be able to hear it. "No," she whispered, "not just the lessons. I will miss you." Colton reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I will miss you too, Marian. More than I probably should, considering I came here as just your teacher." "Are you still just my teacher?" The boldness of her own question surprised her, but she did not take it back. "No," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have not been just your teacher for a while now. Somewhere between teaching you the letter C and watching you read your first complete sentence, I went and fell in love with you." Marian felt tears spring to her eyes, but these were nothing like the bitter tears she had cried the day Mrs. Hendricks humiliated her. These were tears of joy, of relief, of a happiness so profound it felt almost frightening. "I love you too. I think I started falling that very first night when you showed up at my door offering hope when I thought I had none left." Colton stood and came around the table, gently pulling her to her feet. He cupped her face in his hands, his calloused palms warm against her cheeks. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," she breathed, and then his lips were on hers, gentle but sure, tasting of coffee and possibility. The kiss was everything a first kiss should be, sweet and searching, a promise of more to come. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard, and Colton rested his forehead against hers. "When I come back from the cattle drive, I am going to court you properly," he said. "With flowers and Sunday drives and dinner at the hotel where everyone can see. And if you will have me, Marian Caldwell, I am going to marry you. Not because you can read now, though I am so proud of how hard you have worked. But because you are brave and kind and you make me want to be a better man." "I will have you," Marian said, laughing through her tears. "I will absolutely have you, Colton Hayes." They spent the rest of the evening not on lessons but on talking, really talking, about their hopes and dreams and fears. Colton told her about his plans to eventually buy his own small ranch. Nothing huge, just enough land to raise some cattle and horses. Marian shared her dream of maybe teaching other women who had never learned to read, passing on the gift he had given her. "We could do that together," Colton said. Once we are married and settled, I could help teach too. Make it something available to anyone who wants to learn, men or women, no shame or judgment. You really think we could do that? I think we can do anything we set our minds to. He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, and Marian felt her whole body respond to his nearness. But he pulled back before things could progress beyond propriety. I should go. I need to be up early tomorrow to prepare for the drive, but I will come see you before we leave. True to his word, Colton stopped by the next evening, staying only briefly to say goodbye. He held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, and made her promise to be safe while he was gone. 3 weeks, he murmured against her temple. 21 days and then I am coming back to you. Those 3 weeks were the longest of Marian's life. She threw herself into practicing her reading and writing, working through the books Colton had left with methodical determination. She started a journal as he had suggested, writing about her days in careful, improving script. She wrote about the changing colors of autumn leaves, about the first frost that came early that year, about how much she missed him and counted down the days until his return. But she also found herself using her new skills in practical ways. She read the newspaper now, slowly but surely making her way through articles about politics and cattle prices and distant events. She wrote letters to the aunt who had written her before, no longer needing to rely on others to serve as her voice. She began to hold her head higher in town, no longer ducking away when she saw Mrs. Hendricks or the other gossips. The change in her did not go unnoticed. One afternoon, nearly 2 weeks into Colton's absence, a young woman approached her outside the general store. She was perhaps 19 or 20, with dark hair and nervous eyes. "Miss Caldwell," the woman said hesitantly. "My name is Sarah Porter. I heard that you have been learning to read." Marian tensed, waiting for mockery or more humiliation, but Sarah's expression held only hope. "I cannot read either," Sarah continued in a rush. "My family never had the opportunity to teach me, and I am so ashamed of it. But if you learned, maybe you could teach me. I could pay you in eggs and butter from our farm. I just want to be able to read my Bible and write letters and not feel so stupid all the time." Marian felt her heart swell with emotion. Here was someone who understood exactly what she had been through, who needed the same help she had received. "I am still learning myself," she said honestly. "But I would be happy to share what I know. Come to my cabin tomorrow evening around 7. We will work through the alphabet together." Sarah's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Thank you. Oh, thank you so much." That evening, Marian prepared for her first student, setting out slate and chalk and the primer that Colton had used with her. She felt nervous but also excited, already understanding what Colton must have felt when he decided to teach her. There was something profound about passing on knowledge, about helping someone else escape the prison of ignorance. The lesson with Sarah went well. The younger woman was eager and attentive, soaking up everything Marian taught her. They worked through the alphabet, and Sarah practiced each letter with the same determination Marian remembered feeling. When the lesson ended, Sarah hugged her impulsively. "You have given me hope," she said. "I was starting to think I would never learn, that I would be stuck like this forever." "You will learn," Marian assured her. "It takes time and practice, but you will get there, I promise." Over the next week, 2 more women approached Marian, both wanting lessons. She set up different times for each of them, structuring her days around teaching what she was still learning herself. It was challenging but rewarding in ways she had never imagined. She wrote about it in her journal, wishing she could tell Colton, knowing he would be proud of her. Finally, on a cold afternoon in late October, word spread through town that the Bridger Ranch cattle drive had returned. Marian was in the middle of a lesson with Sarah when she heard the news. She forced herself to finish the session properly, not wanting to shortchange her student. But as soon as Sarah left, she found herself pacing her cabin, watching the road anxiously. Colton arrived just as the sun was setting, riding up fast and dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. Marion ran out to meet him, propriety forgotten, and he caught her in his arms, lifting her off the ground as he spun her around. "I missed you," he said against her hair. "God, Marion, I missed you so much." "I missed you too." She pulled back just enough to kiss him, pouring 3 weeks of longing into the contact. He kissed her back just as fervently, his hands tangling in her hair, and it was several long moments before they broke apart. "I have so much to tell you," Marion said breathlessly. "I have been teaching other women to read, 3 of them so far and more have asked, and I finished all the books you left me and started on the newspapers and wrote in my journal every single day." Colton's face shone with pride and love. "That is incredible. I knew you would not just maintain your progress, I knew you would build on it. But teaching others already? Marion, that is wonderful." They went inside, and Marion showed him her journal, watching as he read through her entries. His expression grew softer with each page, and when he reached the entries where she had written about missing him, about loving him, about counting down the days until his return, he looked up at her with such emotion that she felt her breath catch. "Marry me," he said. "I know I said I would court you properly first, and we will, but I need you to know that I am serious about this. I want you to be my wife, Marion. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every evening. I want to build that ranch I told you about and fill it with our children and students who want to learn. I want everything with you." "Yes," Marion said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Colton Hayes, whenever you want, wherever you want, just yes." He kissed her again, and this time there was a promise in it, a claim that spoke of forever. When they finally settled at the table, hands clasped together, they started making plans. "We should wait until spring," Colton said practically, though he looked like the waiting pained him. "That will give me time to save more money and find us some land. The Bridger Ranch is selling off a parcel, about 200 acres in the South Valley with a creek running through it. It would be perfect for us. I have been saving for years, and I almost have enough for the down payment." "I have some money saved too," Marion said. "From the laundry and mending and now from the teaching. It is not much, but it is yours if it will help." "It is ours," Colton corrected gently. "Everything we have will be ours together." He paused, then added, "I should probably speak to someone about this formally. Do you have any family I should ask permission from?" Marion shook her head. "No one. My father is gone, and I have no other close relatives. I am my own woman, and my answer is the only one that matters." "Then we will announce our engagement, and I will start working on getting that land secured. The ranch house is small, just 4 rooms, but it is sturdy and we can add on as we need to." The next Sunday, Colton and Marion attended church together, sitting side by side in the pew. After the service, Colton stood up in front of the congregation and announced their engagement. There were gasps and whispers, and Marion saw Mrs. Hendricks's face turn an unflattering shade of red. But there were also smiles and congratulations, particularly from the women Marion had been teaching. "I guess someone did want to marry a woman who could not read," Colton said loudly enough for Mrs. Hendricks to hear. "Though she can read just fine now, no thanks to people who prefer to shame rather than help. My fiancée is one of the strongest, most determined women I have ever met, and I am proud to be standing here with her." The words were a public vindication that Marion had not even known she needed. She felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back, standing tall beside the man she loved. The winter months passed in a flurry of activity. Colton secured the land purchase with the combined savings they had pooled together, and they spent every spare moment working on the small ranch house, making it ready for their life together. Marion continued teaching her growing group of students, and Colton often joined the evening sessions when his ranch work allowed, helping with the lessons and making the women feel comfortable. They set their wedding date for the first Saturday in April, when the weather would be warming and wildflowers would be blooming across the prairie. Marion sewed her own wedding dress, a simple but beautiful creation in cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. One of her students, A widow named Mrs. Patterson, who had become a good friend, helped her with the intricate details. "You and Mr. Hayes are going to be very happy together," Mrs. Patterson said as she helped fit the dress. "I can see how he looks at you, like you are the sun and moon and stars all rolled into one." "I feel the same about him," Marion admitted. "I never thought I would find this kind of love. I was so focused on just surviving, on hiding my shame, that I did not think I deserved happiness." "Everyone deserves happiness, dear, and you too have something special. Hold on to it." The wedding was held in the small church in Silver Creek on a perfect spring morning. The wildflowers Marion had imagined were indeed blooming, and she carried a bouquet of them, bright splashes of yellow and purple and red. Colton stood at the altar looking handsome in a new suit, his eyes locked on her from the moment she began walking down the aisle. The ceremony itself was simple but heartfelt. They spoke their vows clearly and firmly, promises to love and cherish through all the years ahead. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and told Colton he could kiss his bride, the kiss they shared was tender and full of joy. The small congregation erupted in applause, and for once, all the talk in Silver Creek was positive. The reception was held at the hotel, with food and music and dancing. Marion danced with her new husband under the afternoon sun, feeling like she was floating. When they finally left to ride out to their new home, their ranch, people lined the street to wave them off. The ranch house was small but cozy, and they had furnished it simply but comfortably over the winter months. Colton carried Marion over the threshold, and she laughed as he set her down in their front room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hayes," he said, and the name sounded sweeter than any poetry. That night, they came together as husband and wife, learning each other with gentle hands and whispered words of love. Colton was patient and tender, making sure Marion felt cherished and safe. The physical intimacy was new and slightly overwhelming, but also beautiful in its own way, a natural extension of the emotional bond they had been building for months. Afterward, lying in their bed with Colton's arms wrapped around her, Marion felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. "I love you," she murmured, her head resting on his chest. "I love you too," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "Today was the best day of my life." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Colton worked hard building up their ranch, starting with a small herd of cattle and a few good horses. Marion continued teaching, converting one room of their house into a dedicated classroom space. They charged nothing for the lessons but gratefully accepted the eggs, butter, bread, and other goods that people brought in trade. Word of their informal school spread beyond Silver Creek. Women from neighboring towns began showing up, sometimes traveling hours for the chance to learn. Marion and Colton accommodated as many as they could, holding lessons in the evenings and on weekends. They taught reading and writing, but also basic mathematics, how to keep household accounts, how to write business letters. "We are making a real difference," Colton said one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sun set over their land. It was late summer now, more than a year since that day in town when Mrs. Hendricks had humiliated Marion. "Look at how many women have learned because of what we have started." "Because of what you started," Marion corrected, snuggling closer to him. "If you had not come to my door that first night, none of this would have happened. We started it together. I taught you and you took that gift and multiplied it. That was all you, Marion." That fall, Marion discovered she was pregnant. The realization came with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She told Colton one evening after supper, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. His response was immediate and joyful. He swept her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "A baby, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Marion asked, though she could clearly see that he was. "Happy does not begin to cover it. I am ecstatic, overwhelmed, terrified. But mostly just so incredibly happy." He placed a hand gently on her still flat stomach. "When? I think sometime in early spring, April or May if my calculations are right." They spent the winter preparing for the baby, with Colton building a beautiful cradle from oak wood and Marion sewing tiny clothes and blankets. Her students threw her a party, bringing gifts and offering advice about childbirth and motherhood. Even some of the women who had once gossiped about her showed up with baby items, sheepishly congratulating her on her happy marriage and impending motherhood. Mrs. Hendricks was not among them, but Marion found that she did not care. She had built a good life despite that woman's cruelty, perhaps even partly because of it. The humiliation had driven her to accept Colton's help, and that decision had changed everything. The baby came on a warm April evening, almost exactly a year after their wedding. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Marion was certain she could not do it, could not push through the pain. But Colton stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement and love. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect, the midwife announced, "It is a boy." Colton looked down at his son with wonder written across his face. "A son," he said softly. "We have a son, Marion." They named him James, after Colton's father, with the middle name of Thomas after Marion's father. Little James was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. Colton was a devoted father from the start, walking the floors with James when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, singing off-key lullabies that made Marion laugh. "You are a natural at this," she told him one evening, watching as he rocked James to sleep. "I had a good teacher," Colton replied with a smile. "You taught me that patience and dedication can accomplish anything." As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Colton's hard work and good judgment paid off, and their small herd grew steadily. They added more land, more cattle, hired a couple of ranch hands to help with the work. The teaching program continued to thrive as well, with both Colton and Marion instructing an ever-growing number of students. One afternoon, when James was about 3 years old, a familiar face appeared at their door. Mrs. Hendricks stood on the porch, looking older and somehow smaller than Marion remembered. The woman's usual haughty expression was replaced with something that might have been humility. "Mrs. Hayes," she said formally, "may I speak with you?" Marion was tempted to close the door in her face, but her better nature won out. "Come in, Mrs. Hendricks." They sat in the front room, and Mrs. Hendricks twisted her hands nervously in her lap. "I came to apologize," she said finally, "for what I said to you that day in town, for spreading gossip and trying to shame you. It was cruel and unnecessary, and I am sorry." Marion studied the woman carefully, trying to determine if the apology was sincere. "What brought this on, my granddaughter?" Mrs. Hendricks said quietly. "She is having trouble learning to read. The teacher says she might never master it, that some people just cannot. And I thought about how I treated you, about what I said, and I felt ashamed. I realized that if someone spoke to my granddaughter the way I spoke to you, I would never forgive them." Despite everything, Marion felt a wave of compassion. "Bring her here," she said. "Your granddaughter, bring her to our lessons. We will work with her, help her learn at her own pace." Mrs. Hendricks looked up with tears in her eyes. "You would do that, after how I treated you?" "Everyone deserves the chance to learn," Marion said firmly. "No matter how long it takes or how much they struggle. That is something I learned from my husband, and it is a principle I will always stand by." Mrs. Hendricks left with profuse thanks, and true to Marion's word, the woman's granddaughter, a shy 10-year-old named Emma, began attending lessons. The girl did struggle with reading, but with patience and specialized attention, she slowly improved. Watching Emma's progress, seeing her confidence grow, Marion felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with pride or vindication. It was simply the joy of helping someone find their way. 2 years later, Marion gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah after Marion's first student. Sarah was as different from her brother as night from day, with blonde curls and a sunny disposition. James adored his little sister, taking his role as big brother very seriously. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. They built an addition onto the house, expanding it from 4 rooms to 8, with a proper schoolroom that could accommodate larger classes. They hired a woman from town to help with the teaching, allowing them to offer more sessions and reach more students. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Colton took Marion on a picnic to the spot by the creek where they had often walked during their courtship. The children were with Mrs. Patterson for the afternoon, giving them rare time alone together. They sat on a blanket under a cottonwood tree, eating cold chicken and fresh bread, watching the water flow past. "Do you remember that first night I came to your cabin?" Colton asked, pouring them each a glass of lemonade. "I remember every detail," Marion replied. "I remember thinking you were either crazy or the kindest man I had ever met, possibly both. I was terrified you would say no, that you would send me away and give up on the chance to learn because of pride or fear. I was too desperate to let pride get in the way, and I am so glad I was." Marion leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body. "You saved me that night, Colton. You gave me a future when I thought I had none." "You saved yourself," he countered. "You did the hard work, the learning and practicing. You took what I offered and made something incredible out of it. The school, the students, the lives we have changed, that is all because of your determination and generosity. It is because of both of us." Marion turned to face him fully. "We are a team, you and me. We always have been." Colton kissed her softly. "The best team I could have ever asked for." They stayed by the creek until the sun began to set, talking and laughing and remembering all the moments that had brought them to this place. When they finally returned home, James and Sarah ran to greet them, and Colton scooped both children up, one in each arm, making them giggle. That evening, after the children were in bed, Colton and Marion sat in their front room, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. Through the open window, they could hear the sounds of their ranch, the lowing of cattle, the whinny of horses, the rustle of wind through grass. "We have built a good life here," Marion said contentedly. "The best life," Colton agreed, "and it just keeps getting better." As the years continued to pass, their family grew once more. Marion gave birth to another son when Sarah was 4, and they named him Colton Jr., though everyone called him CJ. The boy was a perfect blend of both parents, with Colton's dark eyes and Marion's gentle spirit. The teaching program became something of a legend in the territory. People traveled from as far as 100 miles away to attend classes, and several of Marion's former students had gone on to become teachers themselves, spreading literacy even further. They had helped more than 200 people learn to read over the years, men and women of all ages and backgrounds. The Silver Creek newspaper, which Marion now read with perfect ease, wrote an article about their school, praising the Hayes family for their community service and dedication to education. Mrs. Hendricks herself wrote a letter to the editor, published prominently, in which she publicly apologized for her past behavior and praised Marion as a pillar of the community. James grew into a responsible young man who loved ranch work and had his father's steady nature. Sarah became an avid reader who could often be found with her nose in a book, dreaming of becoming a teacher herself one day. CJ was still young, but showed signs of being as kind-hearted as both his parents. On a summer evening when Marion was 45 and Colton approaching 50, they sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. Their children were grown or growing, their ranch was thriving, their school was making a real difference in people's lives. Marion thought back to that terrified, ashamed young woman she had been, standing on the general store porch while Mrs. Hendricks announced her illiteracy to the world. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Colton suddenly. "Choosing me?" You could have had any woman in Silver Creek, someone educated and refined, someone who did not need teaching. Colton looked at her like she had just suggested the moon was made of cheese. "Regret marrying the love of my life. Regret building this beautiful family and this meaningful work we do." "Marion Hayes, you must be losing your mind," she laughed. "I suppose that was a foolish question." The only thing I have ever regretted is not meeting you sooner." He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over their years together. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, you and our children and this life we have built together." Marian felt the familiar sting of happy tears. Even after all these years, this man could still move her to emotion with just a few simple words. "I love you, Colton Hayes. I loved you when you taught me the alphabet, I loved you when you proposed, I loved you when each of our children was born, and I love you now. I will love you until my last breath." "And I will love you beyond that," Colton replied, pulling her close. "Into whatever comes after, I will still love you." They sat together as the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, casting long shadows across the land they had worked so hard to build. Inside the house, they could hear their children laughing about something, the sound of home and happiness and family. Marian thought about how much had changed since that awful day when she had thought her life was over, when she had believed that her inability to read had marked her as worthless. She thought about the terrified woman who had opened her door to a kind stranger offering hope. She thought about all the students they had taught, all the lives they had touched, all the joy they had shared, and she thought about the words that had once been used to shame her. "Nobody will marry a woman who cannot read." Well, she had learned to read, had become an accomplished reader and teacher in her own right. But more importantly, she had found a man who had loved her before she could read a single word, who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself, who had offered his hand and his heart without conditions or requirements. The evening star appeared in the darkening sky, bright and steady. Marian made a silent wish on it, though she already had everything she could ever want. She wished for more years with this man beside her, for health and happiness for her children, for the continued success of their school, for all the good things that made life worth living. Colton squeezed her hand gently, and she squeezed back, a silent conversation that needed no words. They had spent so many years working with words, teaching the magic of reading and writing, unlocking the power of literacy for those who had been denied it. But they both knew that some of the most important things in life, the deepest and truest things, existed beyond words: love, devotion, partnership, family, home. These were not things that could be fully captured on a page. Though Marian had certainly tried in the journal, she still kept faithfully. These were things that had to be lived, experienced, built through years of daily choices to show up for each other, to support and encourage, to work side by side toward common goals. As full darkness fell and the first stars multiplied across the vast Wyoming sky, Colton stood and extended his hand to Marian. "Come on, Mrs. Hayes, let's go inside. Tomorrow is going to be another busy day." She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet, following him into the warm, lamp-lit house that was so full of love and life. Behind them, the door to their small porch swung gently in the evening breeze, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the rising moon. Their story had started with shame and secrecy, with cruel words spoken by someone who thought they knew what a woman needed to be worthy of love. But it had transformed into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of kindness, the importance of education, and the enduring strength of love that sees beyond surface flaws to the true person beneath. Marian Hayes had once been a woman who could not read, who had been told that this failing made her unmarriageable, unworthy, less than. Now she was a wife, a mother, a teacher, a pillar of her community. She was a woman who had taken the gift of literacy, one kind Cowboy had offered, and turned it into a legacy that would outlast them both. And every single night for the rest of their long lives together, when Colton kissed her goodnight and whispered that he loved her, Marian remembered that first evening when he had shown up at her door with books and hope and the promise of a better future. She remembered, and she was grateful, and she knew without question that she had been blessed beyond measure. The house settled into nighttime quiet, children tucked into beds, lamps extinguished one by one. In the master bedroom, Colton and Marion lay together as they had for more than 20 years, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Through the window, starlight filtered in, casting soft shadows. "Good night, my love," Colton murmured, already half asleep. "Good night," Marion whispered back. And in the peaceful darkness of their bedroom, in the house they had built on the ranch they had established, surrounded by the family they had created and the community they had served, Marion closed her eyes and drifted into contented sleep, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly who she was meant to be with, living exactly the life she was meant to live. The Wild West had been tamed, at least in their corner of it. And in the taming, in the building of homes and schools and futures, two people had found each other and created something that would endure long after they were gone. A love story that began with the simple act of teaching someone to read and blossomed into a lifetime of shared joy, purpose, and devotion. It was, Marion thought in those final conscious moments before sleep claimed her, the best story she had ever read. And she had read quite a few by now.